All right, let's kick this off. This is the Kern Valley Healthcare District Board of Directors meeting, Wednesday, February 3rd, 2021. This is the open session. And we are called to order. Usually there is something on the agenda about approval of agenda. There it is, approval of agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved, John Blythe.
And now that we have that, I want to make a change. Man, that was stupid. Sorry, guys. I'd like to move up the new business item for Piper Sandler, follow the consent agenda.
Hello to everyone who's tuning in. We're just
and also to move up
so stay tuned.
Tim McGlue's report, actually to be before that, before the Piper Sandler item. So we'll do consent agenda, Tim McGlue's report, and then the Piper Sandler item, and then continue on with the regular order of things. Is that okay with everybody?
Yes, I'll amend my motion to approve those changes.
Thank you, John. Is there a second?
Oh, sir. I'm glad to second.
Is that you, Fred?
Yes, sir. Yeah, Ross, I'll second.
Thank you. Fred seconds. We need to do a vote. Fred, your vote?
Yes.
Gene?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Catherine?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Okay, so the agenda order is approved. So at this point, we will salute our flag and we will turn to Gene Parks.
You repeat with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America.
The Republic.
Flag, United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation.
I love the gap in Zoom.
Am I breaking up?
Lag in Zoom. Thank you, Chief.
You know.
And also, you know, with this gap, if you can please mute yourself if you're not talking, and of course remember to unmute yourself when you need to talk. So it eliminates a lot of the background noise.
Russ, it might be better for somebody there to be able to do the flag salute, because then there won't be any breakup like it just was.
I think you did a fine job.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and Catherine, if you could please do the invocation.
Yes, I will. Thank you, Lord. I just want to thank you that we are a community where we can stand and salute the flag. And I just want to praise you for that. I ask that you be with each one of us during this meeting, that you give us the wisdom, give us the words that we need to support our community hospital and to support the community itself. I just ask that you continue to bless each one tonight and give them a safe drive after the meeting, and those that aren't in attendance but in attendance on the phone or video, that you also be with each one of them and give us a kindness of heart and kindness of tongue as we go through this meeting. I ask all these things in your name. Amen.
That was very nice. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Our mission statement is there on the agenda. I'll waive the reading of it and go to item D, the closed session report, and turn it over to our attorney, Scott.
Yes, in closed session, Dr. Finstead presented the medical quality report. No other items were discussed and no action was taken.
Thank you, Scott. Item E on the agenda is reserved for public comment. And this is the public's opportunity to address the board on any matter under our jurisdiction, but not on tonight's agenda. Are there any members of the public that would like to address the board? And if you're on mute, unmute yourself so we can actually hear. Okay, there are none. So we will move on to item F is the consent agenda. The consent agenda is items listed for approval that are considered routine and non-controversial by staff. They'll be approved and considered in one motion and voted on by the board in one motion, unless a member of the public or any member of the board would like to have an item removed from the consent agenda and reviewed individually. Is there anyone on the board who would like an item from the consent agenda removed? Okay, hearing none. Any member of the public would like an item removed from the consent agenda? Okay, then we'll consider a motion for approval of the consent agenda.
I'll issue a motion. We accept the consent agenda.
That's Fred. Thank you, Fred.
I'll second.
John, thank you. Any discussion on the motion or second? Okay, then we'll vote. Catherine, your vote?
Yes.
Jean, your vote?
Yes.
Fred, your vote?
Yes.
And John, your vote?
Yes.
And Ross is a yes. Consent agenda is approved. Which brings us to Chief Executive Officer's report. I'll turn it over to Tim McGlew. Are you still
Great, thank you, Ross. I'm here. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Again, I am sorry that I'm not able to be with you all tonight. I am actually in Phoenix at the moment. I am on my way to El Paso for the burial of my mother-in-law. She lived with us for about 20 years after my father-in-law passed. And she died on New Year's Eve, or New Year's Day, excuse me. And so because it's a military funeral, we had to wait for the military to allow us the time in which to bring her there and get her buried. And so that's in process right now. So we'll be leaving, just got here probably just a couple of hours ago, and we'll be leaving first thing in the morning to drive to El Paso. But anyway, I appreciate, you know, that I'm able to join in here. Unfortunately, I don't have the screen in front of me to be able to see what's going on there. But anyway, just a couple of things going in on my report. Just, you know, again, the big issue I think that everybody is you know, concerned about and wanting to know more information about is in relation to the COVID vaccines. We have the vaccine has come in slowly, I think, as everybody's been hearing around the country, let alone California. We had initially received 200 doses that were supposed to be first doses that were originally earmarked directly for our employees. We then received an additional 600 doses, which gave us 800 vaccines that were to be used as first doses. Of that, we have given out 513. We have 287 left to go. There's another clinic, I believe, tomorrow, where they'll be giving those out. And again, those are based on the calls that have been placed by the public to get in line, so to speak. We have 200 second doses that we've received. 85 of those have been given. We have 115 more. And we still have 402 more that are left by that are waiting. Those will be the second doses for all of those that have been receiving them so far. And so there were some issues when the vaccine program started. The state, in their infinite wisdom, decided to change the program in which they were using to manage this, which unfortunately created some problems for us in being able to order vaccine. And Greg, through his persistence, was able to work with the county to get some freed up. Apparently that is now, we have fixed that problem, and now Greg is able to place orders directly for the vaccine, which hopefully should help us in the long run here in terms of getting more people vaccinated quickly. We have, as it relates to, we have 2 positive employees. This came down this week with COVID. the one in the SNF. I don't know about where the second one was, but both employees were related.
There are three.
I don't know the third one, but
just found out today there were three. Yes.
All right, so I was aware of two, and those two are related to each other, which is probably how they came down with it. They do spend quite a bit of time together. They were isolated immediately, and all of the residents were tested, and the staff were tested. Everybody was negative. We've got to, that places the unit into a yellow zone categorization. We will have to continue testing weekly on them until we get at least 2 negative tests. We did the baseline, and that's where everybody was negative. We've got to do that 2 more times, at least a week apart, until we can go ahead and move back into a green zone status, which allows us to go ahead and admit more patients and so forth, and take some of the restrictions off of us. But like I said, the staff has done a great job. You know, again, we've gone for a long time without having anybody positive in there. The staff were really conscientious about what they're doing. Like I said, sometimes you just pick the stuff up outside, and like I said, luckily because of the routine testing program that the SNF employees go through, we were able to catch that quickly. So it's you know, it's unfortunate and so forth, and but again, we got it, and we are moving forward from there. And so you know, Sally and her team have done a great job in there, as they have throughout the hospital, in controlling it. Considering what other facilities have gone through, it's remarkable. Very, very proud of everybody. So the next thing I wanted to chat about, unless there's any questions related to COVID items that anybody has.
Tim, my understanding, what
Yeah.
you had just said, I just want to clarify. We're getting, rather than our population of older people, a bunch of us here, we're getting, according to the ones who call in to reserve or call in to get the vaccination, rather than an allocation that's afforded according to our population of seniors.
The doses are based upon, again, well, obviously we cannot get vaccine if we don't have people that have asked for it, first of all. So that's part of it, because it's all by appointment because of all the information that needs to be collected on each of those. We are only giving it right now, again, unless you're a healthcare employee, you've got to be 65 years of age or older. Those are the only ones that are getting the shots right now. And so unless, like I said, we get down to the end of the day and we've got 2 or 3 doses left because someone didn't show up or whatever, and we don't want to waste it. So we'll call somebody on the list, and if they can get there quickly, then they will get the shot. And but again, we've asked everybody when they call to only call if they're in the age group that is currently being serviced. So, so far it is working. Greg's got a good system in place. The mobile clinic has been working very, very well for us in doing that. And so, again, we're going to continue. And I think we're now doing it 2 days a week. And again, I think that will help us get it out a little faster. You know, again, one of the big issues, Mark and I were on a conference call with Assemblyman Devin Mathis the other day. We have a conference call with him on the last Friday of every month. And so typically we sit and talk about issues that are of concern to the hospitals. And this is all of the hospitals in his district. And so obviously COVID has been a huge, huge part of that discussion. One of the things he shared with us the other day is that California is pretty much ranked dead last in our ability to get vaccine from the federal government, primarily because of its effectiveness in administering doses. And so some of the states, I don't know if you've seen the news reports that back east or whatever, that they have done a really, really efficient job in getting them out. They've gotten more drugs, more vaccine. And so it's, I think one of the big pressures why California is got a lot of concerns going on right now in Sacramento in terms of how to improve the system. The state has, in fact, contracted with Blue Shield of California to take over the vaccine program. They will be handling the distribution of the vaccine to the multi-entity hospital facilities, to the counties from which then we draw from, and pharmacies and those kinds of things that will also be rolling out as additional vaccination points. So
Okay.
I don't have at this point in time any more information about when that will start, how long it will take them to gear up to begin taking on that responsibility. But I think it's a mixed bag. I think, you know, you talk to the county health departments, they're kind of concerned about having a third party involved with it. But I think in the long grand scheme, everybody feels comfortable by not having the state be responsible for it anymore. So, yes.
Thank you very much. Again, a lot of information. It sounds, and I could be wrong, it sounds like you're asking us to move out of California.
Don't come to Arizona. My mother is 93 and she's been trying to get a shot for weeks, and there's no shot anywhere. You know, we've even called clear across the other side of Phoenix, and nothing. Nobody has vaccine here. So it's just, yep. Well, I think that's because of all the people. I think all the people from California have already moved to Arizona. That's been part of the problem. Just kind of a similar thing related to COVID is, you know, again, the state issues what they call these all facility letters. We received one just the other day that is new regulations that primarily trying to make it easier for hospitals to comply during COVID. And they addressed, in the past, they've addressed things like staffing waivers and so forth. Surprisingly, the state just cut the staffing waivers. This was hospitals have to meet certain ratios, obviously, for their nursing units and so forth. Because of the crisis, the hospitals were allowed to apply for a waiver based on their staffing issues and how heavily impacted they were by COVID. And they could go above those ratios. And those have been ended. And so that was one of them. The other things they looked at was nurse charting. And Mark, I don't know if I'm talking what things you were going to talk about because we didn't get a chance to talk about it.
We never applied for a waiver, just so you know. Exactly.
And so Mark has managed the staffing. I will attest that it has been difficult at times. And so, but again, we've not had to rely on going out of waiver or going out of ratio in our care for the patients. But one of the things they're offering was us to forego certain aspects of nurse charting, you know, and as Mark and I talked about it, and I'll let him discuss it as well. We don't think those are good ideas. They're allowing us to chart by exception, which basically means if you're supposed to turn the patient every 2 hours, you can say, and you know, you write a note at the end of your shift and basically say the patient was turned every 2 hours as ordered, instead of every 2 hours charting that you did. Unless there was a time that you didn't do it, then you have to chart that. So things like that. There's a whole category, a bunch of categories of those. They were telling us that we no longer had to meet our 2 annual disaster drills. We were allowed to skip those during the duration of the emergency health order. Talk about authentication of medical records, where normally doctors have to complete their records within 15 days after discharge. They've now extended that out to about 30 days. Even this was an interesting one. They even basically said that the hospitals no longer have to complete their employee performance evaluations. That was a real surprising one. Needless to say, we are not planning to do any of those. We're going to continue to do as we're supposed to be doing, following policy. We just don't think it's a good idea to change our practices and get people doing something else and then try to get them to rechange their practices later on. And, you know, it's just not a good thing. Mark, do you want to add anything to that?
Sure. I'll just add that we are in a position where we do not need to, we never did need to apply for a waiver. We did have some struggles at certain times during this last surge, but we were able to manage it. And that I think is a testament. I was planning on asking for forgiveness from the state rather than permission. So I think that in that light, we never did have to ask for a waiver. The staffing documentation or the nursing documentation, I don't think it's easy for a nurse to shift gears. If I'm documenting one way and then they're asking me to document another way, and then they're asking me to I have to go back to where I was doing it before, I just don't see that. I never saw a surge at our facility at this point that required that type of staffing or that type of documentation change. I just don't see it. It's too difficult for the nurses to change how they're doing something. So that being said, I asked, or I told HR today that AFL 21-09 said I don't have to do performance evaluations, as they were bringing me a stack of evaluations that was 13 or 14. And I said, I don't have to do those anymore. And they said, well, what about the raises that come with those performance evaluations? And I said, well, I guess I'll do them. There was no justification for stopping to doing the performance evaluation. So those are my comments.
Okay, good, thanks. One other thing too, again, I sent you in the update report I sent you earlier this week, we talked about the water well situation where the water board for Kern County kind of cited us because we had not been testing all 11 wells that we were supposed to have drilled a number of years ago. This is probably 16 years ago or more. We knew of 9. Those were being tested. We have to do, I think, just 4 that we've been routinely testing for a broad spectrum of things. And they want all of them done to that same level. So that's being adjusted. Bob was able to successfully find well number 10, which was apparently buried in the dirt up north of the hospital, or south of the hospital, I guess, up McRae, just off the roadway. They found it with a metal detector of some kind. And then well number 11 apparently is down. Well, if the lake was up, let's put it this way, it would be underwater. And so not sure why they chose to have it put down there. It is, again, because of all of the dirt and everything that is washed up because of the lake being up and down, can't be found. And so I know we were looking at a number of options for having to comply with that, either putting a new well in, which would have cost us, could have been upwards of, $10,000, $15,000 to drill a new well. We had actually talked with the Kissicks. The Kissicks actually offered us to maybe use one of their wells to test to see whether the water board would accept that or not without having to go through the expense of drilling it. And lo and behold, after all this work to try and do that, and Bob spent quite a bit of time down there looking for it, the water board came back and said, forget it. We don't need to do well number 11 anymore. And so that was great news that we just heard yesterday. And so that saved us a few dollars. And so we'll continue just doing what we're supposed to be doing now that we have the 10 wells identified. So that was just the last update on that from my report to the day. The other things I wanted to chat about, again, we talked about the bond issue that for the debt refinancing that the hospital has been going through and talking about for quite some time now. Actually goes back to last year. And again, we're in the process right now of going out and trying to identify banks that would be interested in lending or issuing the bond to us, which would do a number of things. And I'll let Gary kind of talk to about that in more detail. But again, we have some good news that we just got to earlier this week with regards to 2 banks offering us term sheets to consider. And so what I wanted to do, because this came after the agenda was out, again, there's no decision that has to be made tonight other than just we're going to look at the 2 of these and just say one of them is going to be obviously better than the other. and so forth. But the board is not taking any action at this point in time. That will come later. But I wanted Gary to kind of present this, and Todd from Piper Sandler is also on the line in case there's any questions that the board may have with regards to that. And can kind of share how these things will work and how they're structured and so forth. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Gary. And we move this up primarily to allow them to leave. Again, I appreciate Todd being available. He's calling in, I believe, from Kansas or somewhere. So with the timing and everything, we wanted to be able to kind of get them cut loose and not have to sit through our whole board meeting. So with that, Gary, take it away.
Tim, thank you very much. As Tim indicated, we have been fortunate enough to receive not one, but two actually very strong proposals from banks. These are just proposals. And what we're asking for at this point in time is give Tim authorization to sign one of those proposals. I'll go over them in just a little bit. These are non-binding. These are not commitments. They're simply proposals. And so there's no binding requirement or obligation on behalf of the district by signing this proposal term sheet. But it does allow us to move forward, because the next step we need to do is, if we want to move forward with this, is to have the preferred bank you want to go to, which in this case is First Foundation Bank, to move forward with their next step in the process, which is to secure credit committee approval. We think that'll probably take about 3 weeks, and documentation of this will take about 3 or 4 weeks, and we would expect to come back to this same board at your March meeting. I believe that's March the 3rd, and at that time would seek approval of the board for the financing, assuming all the negotiations and all the approvals are completed at that point in time. But as indicated, we received two very strong proposals, one from Tri-Counties Bank and one from First Foundation Bank. As Tim has indicated, the First Foundation Bank proposal was quite a bit stronger than that from the Tri-Counties Bank. And it was stronger in many areas. The first area is that the interest rate was lower. It was a 2.75% interest rate instead of a 3% for Tri-Counties. Quite frankly, we were pleased to get any proposals at or below 3%, and we have two of them at this point in time. So we felt that both proposals are very strong from an interest rate perspective, but First Foundation was, again, 25 basis points or 1/4% lower at 2.75. Also, the term of the loan, we had requested a 12-year term, and both banks have provided a 12-year term, and subsequent to the term sheet, First Foundation Bank had actually indicated that they would be willing to go to a 13-year term, so allow us to finance this debt over one more year at our option. We can either take the 12-year or the 13-year, but more flexibility is certainly from their proposal at First Foundation Bank. Also, there was no fees, what we call origination fees, from First Foundation Bank. There was about a $16,000 origination fee that would be charged by Tri-Counties Bank. And so when you combine the upfront fees along with the interest rate, there was actually an improvement in the First Foundation Bank over the Tri-Counties Bank in the rate and the yield by about 30 basis points or 0.3%. That works out over the life of the bond issue at more than $250,000 in savings just based upon the interest rate and the fees that would be required for that. That's the minimum. It may be actually greater based upon the assumptions we take on certain analysis. The Tri-Counties Bank also required what's called the Debt Service Reserve Fund. So they require us to set aside 1 year's debt service for the life of the bonds in case the district defaulted. That would be used by Tri-Counties Bank to be able to make at least 1 year's debt service payments. That's approximately $1.4 million that have to be set aside. And we would lose on the investment or reinvestment of that what we call negative arbitrage. And so that's a -2 in comparison with the First Foundation Bank proposal. We also found out that the prepayment or call provisions were more favorable for the district with First Foundation Bank. And we found that the financial covenants, in this case, the debt service coverage ratio and days cash on hand, were again more favorable overall, along with the additional indebtedness test from First Foundation Bank. There were some other provisions also that were a little more favorable with the First Foundation Bank. One of them in particular that is important from my perspective, and that is that the Tri-Counties Bank wanted to have what we call a material adverse change provision that could cause an event of default. Under their proposal, that was not required for First Foundation Bank. So some of the more esoteric or refined components of the proposals we found, again, were a little bit stronger for First Foundation Bank. So just to summarize, I think that of the two proposals, which were both outstanding proposals, my belief, and I think Todd's belief as well, is that the First Foundation Bank was much stronger. One other aspect of this financing is that the district also has a $5 million line of credit with West America Bank, I believe. But this line of credit is insured by Cal Mortgage, and West America Bank has indicated if the Cal Mortgage insurance went away, that they would not be able to provide the $5 million line of credit that the district currently uses primarily for IGT funding. The same First Foundation Bank was willing to provide a $5 million line of credit, revolving line of credit, similar to what West America Bank was providing, but they would not require, in this case, First Foundation Bank would not require that the Cal Mortgage Insurance Program insure it. That's important to us because once we issue these bonds, of course, they're going to refinance the 2003 bonds insured by Cal Mortgage and the loan that has been provided by Oshpod or Cal Mortgage as well. So once those debt instruments are refinanced or paid off, Cal Mortgage does not have an interest to continue with the insurance or guarantee of the line of credit, except for maybe a couple of months. And so this letter of credit that comes from First Foundation Bank also provides us with the capacity to continue on with not just a one-year line of credit, but a two-year line of credit. And I think to be very favorable terms and conditions. As a matter of fact, the security for that line of credit would be identical to the security required for the bond issue, which is a revenue fund pledge. So that makes it much easier from a collateral perspective and from a securing draws under the line of credit. It isn't required based upon certain accounts receivables that most line of credits are used. And so it's a little easier to work with, much easier to document, and uses the same security or collateral that the revenue bonds do. So I'm going to stop with that and see if Todd has any additional comments that I may have missed on either the analysis of the proposals between Tri-Counties Bank and First Foundation Bank, or the proposal of the line of credit from First Foundation Bank. Todd, go ahead.
Thanks, Gary. I don't really have any additional information to provide relative to the two proposals we did receive. Just to give you a little bit of an indication, though, on how the process went, we did go out to over 30 banks and different investors to get proposals for the loan, and so ended up with two proposals, but they're both very good proposals, and so we're excited about that. And that's often what happens in our process, where we'll go out to any number of banks and you know, get proposals only from a smaller number. But in this case, it's worked out well. Thanks.
Thank you, Todd. And I'll just add one other comment. One of the provisions that we like that actually both banks provided, but if we go forward to First Foundation Bank, it's really important, is that they provide us an interest rate locks for 60 days. So the lock means that if we close the bond issue within 60 days of their proposal term sheet, which was just last Friday, they will not have the interest rate go up as a result of maybe increases in market rates of interest. We've seen a little bit of an increase in some market rates recently, but we don't expect much. But again, it's a favorable provision to have a total of 60 days where they agree not to increase the rate so long as we close the bond issue in that 60-day time frame. that's one of the main reasons why we're here today to talk about this, that we do need to move the process forward. And again, as I mentioned previously, by signing this term sheet with First Foundation Bank, it does not obligate the district at all. And we would come back to the district at the next month's board meeting, March 3rd, I believe, for a final approval and to move this forward. I'll stop at that point and open up, see if there are any questions.
The loan is roughly 15 million, right?
The loan is actually about 12.7 million, 12.6 to 12.7 million. That would be to repay the 2003 bonds, pay what's called the Heathcliff loan at Cal Mortgage, and to fund $5.5 million of new money. So we're thinking that's going to be around 12.6 to 12.7 million.
Okay. Does the funds all have to be used specifically for the construction in a certain time period?
Yes, the district will have 3 years, what we call the temporary period, to expend funds. There are some exceptions to that, so it could go beyond 3 years, but generally that's the rule that you have to expend the money within 3 years. The 5.5 million needs to go towards improvements to your health facility. So we provided them with a listing of those items in your capital budget that relate to the purchase of a building, which I think you've already purchased, and so you'd be reimbursed for that amount. And any other of those capital expenditures that have already occurred before could be reimbursed, but then would have to be expended within the 3-year time frame on projects that are capital projects already in your budget based upon the hospital expansion and improvement programs.
Any additional funds that we need to finish the program, because that will not do it, what options do we have?
Well, this provision, the proposal from First Foundation Bank has a provision under what we call additional indebtedness, which is a provision in the documents that allow you to incur additional debt. That provision allows you, so long as you have a debt service coverage ratio that provides for at least a 1.25 times coverage with the new debt, allows you to incur new debt strictly from a revenue fund pledge. These documents will also allow us to do a structure that we've done for some other hospitals, whereby we provide a security interest in your operating tax revenues to maybe secure some debt as well for that. We also have the ability to issue for, especially for equipment needs that are shorter term, we have the ability to issue tax exempt municipal leases for this type of financing that are fairly favorable interest rate right now and can be used as well, that do not require a revenue fund pledge, but just a general pledge. There's obviously the ability to go out to the taxpayers. That's not, I think, anticipated at this point in time. But obviously, if you're asking for options to be able to do it, certainly go back to the taxpayers for a much, much lower dollar amount, and therefore a much lower tax burden to be able to provide either bonds secured by parcel taxes or general obligation bonds secured by ad valorem taxes to be able to fill that gap. The district also has the ability to be able to use some of its cash reserves as well to fund the remaining or a portion of the remaining project costs as well. All of those are possibilities for filling the gap and financing the remainder of the project, or again, to use cash reserves for a portion of the remainder of the project as well.
It seems like it would be more prudent on our part to go to the community first and get their buy-in rather than get us in a position where with our finances in the past, the way things have happened through the COVID, we've got some additional benefits, but we could be in trouble within the next couple of years if we do this loan. It sounds attractive, sounds good, but and the other thing, the West America Bank, it's very important we have the funds there for the IGT match. So anyway, that's my thoughts. Thank you.
You're very welcome. And like I said, the First Foundation Bank also provided a proposal to do the line of credit that replaced the West America Bank So we're not talking about losing anything on the line of credit with this proposal. You would have a $5 million line of credit revolving for the same purpose you have the existing one with West America Bank. So there's no loss on that.
Well, the difference there is it's guaranteed to renew every year almost, as opposed to you've got a 2-year limit on the sort of the guarantee for the $5 million.
That's a revolving line, as I understand it.
Right.
Correct.
Which is the same thing we got through Bank of America, right? Or West America.
But West America is not going to continue. West America most likely won't continue.
It actually, there was a provision on the existing line of credit that was only for IGT. The one from First Foundation Bank does not make that same provision. It's just for operations. And it has to be paid down to zero for at least 30 days during the year. But it doesn't restrict us the way the one at West America Bank did to just IGT.
Yeah, well, that was a good
thing. The other question, yes, it is a good thing. The other thing too that, and Chet can certainly comment on this as well. There's a very good likelihood that West America Bank will not continue the line of credit with us because they've only done that with the guarantee of Cal Mortgage. With this bond refinancing going through, Oshpod Cal Mortgage will no longer be in the picture anymore, which in many respects is a good thing. But again, so that may preclude West America from even being able to offer us a line of credit.
There was some discussion about working with Cal Mortgage to go ahead and continue to help us with that situation because it's a good deal for us and a little bit of safety. But
Chad, do you have any comment on that or feedback?
I didn't quite hear all of his comment. That's question.
Chad, I think the key point is that when your discussions with Cal Mortgage, with Cal Mortgage, they indicated that if the bonds are paid off and the loan is paid off, if we do the refinancing, they will not continue to guarantee the line of credit. Is that correct?
Let me say it this way. They were asked if I was basically proposing to them that if Cal Mortgage would, for some reason, because at one point Cal Mortgage was saying they wouldn't actually guarantee the line of credit again without a reapplication. I thought that was actually going to happen this last year. And so I proposed to West America Bank, what would they do if there was not a Cal Mortgage guarantee? And if they would do something, would it have to be reduced in amount? They wouldn't do anything at all on a line of credit without the Cal Mortgage guarantee.
That's right.
Chad, it would be possible to maybe negotiate to get them to guarantee it. That was part of some discussions that we had.
Again, I can't quite hear you, Gene, but what was said there, I can't quite hear that.
In the past discussions, there was a possibility that we could reapply and get them to go ahead and guarantee it. And even a reduced amount wouldn't be the end of the world because of 5 million is, but only for.
I don't think there's, once the loan's paid off, my understanding is that Cal Mortgage is not going to guarantee anything as long as there is a balance in the, from what I got from Cal Mortgage, as long as there's a balance owing in the line of credit, and that's why we left $50,000, and that's all it's owing, then they would probably continue to guarantee it until the bonds are paid off.
Okay.
And other
right.
than that, they would.
Okay, thank you.
So we cannot vote on this tonight. We can ask questions of Tim and Gary and Todd and Chet. So we can't give Tim direction or anything like that. I guess what we can say is that Tim will probably make the decision to move forward with the informal direction of signing the more favorable bid and bring it back to the board for our formal consideration in March.
Do you need a motion?
Yeah, there's not. Yeah, no motion because that was not an agenda item. But I think, you know, again, I don't think there's any question that the First Foundation's term sheet was favorable to Tri-Counties. And so, you know, I agree with what Ross is saying. I think, you know, from our perspective, if we're going to move forward and continue our review of this, it ought to be with the Tri-County or with the First Foundation bank term sheet.
I don't think there's any question that that's my recommendation, Tim. There are multiple
I agree with you.
provisions that's better.
Hey, Ross, may I say something?
Yes.
Ross?
What's that, Scott?
So because this is a non-binding letter of intent, it is not committing the district to any particular action, and it is not incurring any expense or cost on behalf of the district. I think the question is, are there any board members who oppose Tim signing the offer that is in the best interest of the district as determined by Tim, Chet, and Gary and the other consultants?
Well said. Thank you. That's why you're the legal counsel.
No, Ross, this is John. I was just going to say on a trivial note, one of the founders of Tri-Counties Bank is actually Bill Casey, who was a consultant here in the 90s when we defaulted on the original bonds. So that's just a really odd kind of coincidence, but I agree. The First Foundation proposal sounds a lot more beneficial to us as a district.
Yeah. In my reading of it, and I'm certainly no financial wizard, but you know, before we heard the presentations this evening, it clearly was the one that looked the best to me also. You know, and to address Gene's concern about you know, being upside down on this, I don't see a downside. I don't see a downside with moving forward with this. We've already got the debt with the two existing funds that we owe. So this will refinance those two pieces of debt. So the payment ends up being more reasonable. We get a more favorable interest rate and save money because of the refinancing. And that leaves us $5 million, $5+ million for our construction project. And if things go wrong in the next 2 to 3 years, we still have that $4.5 million in cash in our reserves that can cover that. And so there's not a downside. There's not a risk in moving forward with this in my mind. I think it's the right thing to do.
Yeah. Well, we've also been talking about trying to get out of Cal Mortgage since way before I've even been elected to this board. So I'm actually really excited to move on this.
I am too. This is the ticket out of that burden off our shoulders.
What burden is that?
Cal Mortgage.
Well, first of all, Cal Mortgage holds our cash reserves, and they hold our assets.
They actually own all of our hard and soft. They're lean against both of our hard and soft assets.
That's
that means
correct.
The building, everything. It all has leaned against it for Cal Mortgage. The amount outstanding.
Yeah, well, it's like Scott said, all we're doing is, and I agree, he should move forward. It's not binding. We can talk about it at the next board meeting, but he definitely should move forward with him being able to sign.
All right. Okay. Any other discussion on this before we move on? Tim, do you have any more to add?
No, like I said, I agree with Chet. That's been our recommendation, is to move forward with the First Foundation Like I said, I think in the scheme of what we've been trying to do for the last 7-8 years in trying to figure out, again, we've gone to the community 4 times, and so forth. And I think we've all realized that if we're going to make this happen, we're going to make it happen through, the hospital. And so we take this as far as we can. If we can get the vast majority of the construction completed using this means, if we ultimately did have to go back to the public, it would be for a very, hopefully small amount at the end of the project. And so, like I said, I think it makes great sense for us to continue to do everything we can to keep that moving forward. That was actually one of our strategic plan objectives. So I think it meets that objective as well. That's all I've got.
Thanks, Tim. So that brings us to the Piper Sandler item, which is number 1 under new business. We'd move that up on the agenda so that the folks from out of state don't have to hang on the phone for so long. So Tim, you want to give a brief discussion of this item? Yeah, this is, again, when we went back to redo the debt restructure here, we started a year ago, and Piper, I think it was Piper Jaffray at the time, was in there. And again, there's 3 pieces to this. One was Gary as the financial consultant. The second was the bond attorneys. And then the third piece is actually the
placement agent.
Placement agent, thank you, I was trying to remember. And that's Piper Sandler. And so the proposal that is in the packet here is the exact same proposal that we had a year ago. The terms are the same in terms of the amount that they would charge for that. Everything's the same. And I've had Scott look at that. He did not have any issues with that. Scott can comment if he'd like. And so again, this was a formality. We didn't get that done. We approved the other 2 pieces of that earlier. This piece unfortunately got left out. And so we just need to go back and get this done, because without that, this all drops. So this is an important piece of the whole puzzle here. So I'm requesting permission to go ahead and execute that agreement. And this is Ross. I do have one question for you, Tim. So this is an integral part of refinancing with our revenue bonds, but it is not formalized. We're actually not out of pocket anything. Correct. Until we formally approve moving forward with the bonds. That's correct? That is absolutely correct. That is the same as the other 2 agreements that were approved. Okay, thank you. Does the board have any questions or any discussion on this agreement?
Yeah, this is John. Was there I don't see it on here. Maybe I'm not seeing it. Was there an underwriter's discount on this, Todd?
Yeah, it's a placement agent fee, but yes, it's a similar concept. I think it's both, actually. I probably proposed, because back when I put that together, we were unsure of our role as to whether it was going to be placement agent or underwriter, which is kind of a technical distinction. But yeah, there is a fee there. I think it's 50 basis points, so of the par amount.
Okay, gotcha. Oh, I see it. Okay, I do see it now. I'm just blind, I guess. Okay, I see it. Thank you.
Hey, Todd, on item 5 in the agreement, other matters relating to our engagement. And I'm wondering if this is just boilerplate language, because it says one of the things in there, a successful authorizing bond election, which we're not holding on this refinancing.
Yes, I mean, that contract is very boilerplate. So yeah, I mean, my services basically are to to kind of locate the bank and then get us to closing from here on out in conjunction with Gary and the rest of the finance team. So, yeah, there's no bond election, obviously.
All right. I just wanted to make sure we had the right set of clauses in here. So if there are no more any questions by members of the board or any questions by members of the public, certainly entertain a motion to approve this agreement.
I'll make a motion to approve it.
Okay, I'll second.
John seconds. Any more discussion? Any member of the public wishing to be heard? Okay, and John, your vote?
Yes.
Fred, your vote?
Yes.
Jean, your vote?
Yes.
And Catherine, your vote?
Yes.
And I am a yes. So your agreement is approved conceptually.
Great. Great. Thank you.
Thank you for being here tonight, both of you. Appreciate your time and your help in helping us understand this.
Thank you. Very welcome. Just one question before we leave. It's my understanding, based upon Scott's discussion, is that based upon the circumstances and discussion tonight, Tim is able to sign both of the term sheets for both the bond issue and the line of credit with First Foundation Bank. Is that correct?
That's my understanding.
Mm-hmm. Just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Thanks. Good night.
Good night, guys.
Good night,
Thank you
everyone.
much.
Thank you.
Good night.
Talk to you tomorrow.
Thank you
Bye.
very much.
Okay, so then let's go back to item G, reports. So we get back to regular order of our agenda, and we have foundation report. Is Judy Hyatt in the mix?
No, she's not. You have me tonight.
Hi, Debbie.
So the foundation is starting to make plans for this year. We are going to start reaching out for bands for River Rhythms. Hopefully we'll be able to have it this year. We have definitely canceled the Heart Walk. We have just finished a letter of intent to Dignity Health on a grant proposal. We're getting ready to write our grant for the diabetic class. So those are some of the things we've been working on the last couple of weeks. Any questions? That's my report.
Thank you. Do we have an auxiliary report tonight?
The auxiliary did not provide a report.
Okay, thank you, Heidi. Dr. Finstead, medical staff report.
All right, thank you, Ross. So in the month of January, the Pharmacy and Therapeutics Committee met on January 11th. We discussed COVID-19 issues as a regular part of our agenda. We also have decided to move forward with obtaining the high-dose influenza vaccine for the 21-22 influenza season instead of the regular dose. That should provide an extra level of protection, particularly for our nursing center residents. We discussed the fact that the Rural Health Clinic is in the process of developing a formulary for the medications they keep on site. We had an item on the agenda regarding a consent form for a new treatment program through physical therapy. Unfortunately, Grace was not able to be at that meeting because of prior commitment, so that's been moved to get information from her for our next meeting in March. We reviewed and approved two policies from pharmacy regarding moving people from IV antibiotics to oral therapy, and along with orders regarding duplicate medication orders and how to deal with those. We also reviewed our regular monthly and quarterly reports, which consist of blood usage, blood culture analysis, medication safety, medication area inspections, and MRSA screening, along with hand hygiene and Foley catheter usage. The Infection Control Committee met on January 12th and discussed items related to the retention of their records. Apparently, currently they are retaining records forever. The guidelines recommend deleting records or destroying records after 6 years. So they're moving forward with that. That will be coming to Medical Executive Committee for final approval next month. In addition to that, we reviewed, or they reviewed their regular quarterly and monthly reports, including hospital-acquired infections from the nursing center and acute care, blood culture analysis, MRSA screening, hand hygiene, and clean trace audits, along with environmental care compliance rounds in the nursing center. The Medical Quality Council met on January 19th and reviewed the quality items from last year. Those were presented in the closed session. And then finally, the Medical Executive Committee met on January 26th. We approved the credential file that was approved by the board earlier on the consent agenda. We reviewed and approved the 2 policies from pharmacy and therapeutics and discussed another policy regarding the appointment of medical directors from the medical staff office. We also worked on some of the articles of the medical staff bylaws and working on approving those and moving forward with the revision of the bylaws. And that's the end of my report, unless there are any particular questions.
Thank you, Dr. Finstead. Any questions for him?
No questions. Thank you.
All right. Great. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gary.
Okay, and we heard from our CEO, so we'll skip over that report and go to Chief Nursing Officer, Mark Gordon.
Well, good evening, everyone. So as you might imagine, the stress and the emotional toll on the nursing staff is it's at an all-time high. Our COVID percentage increases in the Valley. We're at around 10%. We've done well with our staffing. Currently, the skilled nursing facility is in a yellow environment, which means that visitation is absolutely forbidden. We're also having to test all the residents. We have to have a set of 2 consistent, all residents negative tests before we can move back into a green zone. So we're working on that right now. The COVID testing is limited to 1 day per week due to the allocation of resources. We have had new nurses who have been kind of assigned to doing the community testing, and I'm not able to get them trained in the actual working as nurses. So we've agreed to just do the testing once a week on Wednesday, and the rest of the time can be spent training those nurses to actually do what nurses do. We are kind of excited to invite them into the hospital to work. They did do 198 tests today through the community testing site. I was also informed that the teachers are going to be doing their own testing here within the next week. So that will help our community testing diminish greatly. I'm not sure how much, but there are a lot of teachers that have been going through the community testing drive-through because of requirements that are placed on them to get tested. So anyway, that's moving forward. I don't know that we'll have so many people going through the community testing. Transfers out of the emergency room are happening at a more consistent rate now. the Bakersfield hospitals continue to be struggling. However, the ERs are managing to provide a disposition for their patients quicker, which means that that opens up spaces for us to be able to transfer into. So that's kind of, that belt is kind of loosening up. I wanted to mention that Tim has arranged for me to participate on an EMS task force to help solve a long-standing problem with ED wall time challenges. Ross, do you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
Wall time in ERs?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I got volunteered. I got I got volunteered to help on that committee, just so you know.
Good.
So we're working on that. I look forward to hearing from Jeff Ferris to find out what how I can help. Another thing that kind of by necessity, our ER nurses are receiving training to work in the CPSI work platform, the electronic health record, due to the ongoing need for care for ICU level patients when necessary. If we admit a patient to the floor, to acute care, and they diminish to a point where they have to be in an ICU level setting, to document on them was always a problem, moving them back into the ER and having the critical care nurses take care of them. So they're receiving special training and they're accepting that. So we'll see. It worked out well the other day with a patient who had to be moved back to the ER and then transferred out ultimately. So that worked out. The CNA program, I'll say that 9 students started on Monday this week. So we have the benefit of having 9 students starting our third, I think, CNA program. We're happy for that. And then a tip for anybody who wears glasses: if you're wearing a mask, put a tissue inside the mask and it will capture the moisture and you will not fog up your glasses. And that is my report for the end of the day.
That's a great tip and it works. Thank you, Mark. Okay, and that brings us to our Chief Financial Officer, Chet Beadle.
Okay, we did a fairly in-depth analysis and report on the month of December in our finance meeting. So I'd like to actually move to the 6-month year-to-date report for how the district is doing financially for the first half of this fiscal year. That's in your packet. If you want to follow along with me, it's actually on page 21 of your packet. If you want to follow along with me. During the first 6 months of our fiscal year, we actually generated $57.3 million in gross revenue charges. That is as compared to a year ago. For 6 months, we had $56.5 million that we generated. We also put in, as of July 1st, a 7% price increase. We only have one product line, basically, which is the clinic, that actually is in excess of their budget. But some of the others aren't too far off. We did had some good months where we had inpatient and swing, where we generated for that service for 6 months, $7.7 million versus $6.9 in the prior fiscal year. In our clinic, we actually generated $9.3 million versus $8.5 in the prior year. For our outpatient, this is ER and referred outpatients combined, $27.4 million versus $27.6 million in the prior year. And that's even with a 7% price increase. So there's been a fairly substantial decline in the volumes in our referred outpatients and the emergency room. And it's not as much referred outpatients as it is the emergency room. Referred outpatients actually come from mostly our clinic and other doctor's offices, but mostly our clinic. The ER has been substantially down for a number of months now. So even over 6 months, we have not kept up with the prior year. That's a 7% price increase. The SNF, we actually, again, it's a volume issue there. Have continued to see declines. It went up slightly in the last couple of weeks, but actually we were only at 11.8 million in revenue generation versus 12.4 in the first 6 months of last fiscal year. The retail pharmacy has, although it's spending a little more in its supplies, its pharmaceuticals, it has realized a little more revenue than last year, $1,049,000 for the first 6 months versus $980,000 in the prior fiscal year. The deductions from revenue contracts, including bad debts and charity care, are 43.3 million versus 42.6 last year. The percentages of each of the gross revenue are predominantly the same. Our net patient revenue, therefore, before other operating is 3.9 this year, 3.8 for the prior year 6 months. We actually have generated a little more other operating revenue, and other operating revenue basically is items like from IGT or Prime that we know are going to be taken to income. So this year we have 333,000 for the first 6 months. Last year, 152,000. So for collectible from operations or revenue generation, 14.3 million this year, 13.9 or 14 million last year. Now let's get down to the direct expenses. Direct expenses are, even with the lower volume, we've got salaries and wages at 6.6 million versus 6.3 last year for 6 months. I will tell you that some of that's in hours that are related to COVID. We are now trying to justify those hours to the payroll protection program. That it was something we had to cover, and to HHS for their supplemental income to say that's for COVID, and we need to keep our money for that. What they want is they want to be, both of them actually, the PPP isn't a direct loan from a bank. The HHS money, it's not a loan, but the federal government wants to get back anything that you did not spend on COVID-19 patient care, testing, or vaccinations. So we're trying to show as much as we can on that. We're working with an outside CPA firm, which we had a conference call with today. Barbara's been spending a lot of time on it. And we're trying to get it looks good, but we're trying to get as much justification in there as we can. Fringe benefit follows the salaries as a percentage for the most part. The contract labor, actually though it's been up some in some months. For the first 6 months of this year, it was only in the aggregate 492,000 versus 673 in the first 6 months of last year. The physician fees are relatively close, 1.84 this year, 1.81 last year. The purchase services, this is going to be one that shows you 1,285,000 this year, 627,000 last year. Majority of that difference is from we're not doing the lab work for our COVID testing in-house. It was being sent out to Quest. And so over the last 2-3 months, actually the last 2 months, I know, we've had over $500,000 in additional costs for Quest laboratory purchase services. and that's really hurting us. We have got in our new testing equipment that's rapid. We want to make sure we use that as much as we possibly can and keep things away from having to go out to Quest and continue this kind of negative variance in our cost of purchase services. We did ask the county in some of their supplemental, other than what they were paying directly, to reimburse us for the period of $300,000, and they disallowed it. So we're now using it. We're trying to use it against HHS to get to keep that money from HHS. Supply costs, $1.9 million this year, $1.7 million last year. That does include the supplies that were not provided by the county for COVID-19. We do have some, but they provided the majority of that. Utilities, $306,000 versus $318,000 last year. So you can see we're beginning to realize some improvement with our reduction, or our change in our power generation equipment. Repairs and maintenance, $48,000 versus $37,000 last year. Insurance, $234,000 versus $245,000 last year, which is a nice little reduction there. And other expenses, $386,000 versus $372,000 last year. The leases and rentals, $87,000 versus $108,000 last year. And depreciation, $264,000 versus $241,000 last year. Simply other items that we've acquired that we have begun to depreciate. Investment income, $67,000 versus $60,000 last year. That's mostly coming from our money in LAIF, our investment money. We have a little more in there this year than last year. The property taxes, $141,000 this year, $140,000 last year. So that's relatively the same. Our long-term interest, because it's on the bonds that exist and going down, $189,000 this year, $225,000 last year. Our other non-operating revenue and expense is basically the residuals for our current bonds. Some of that should go away, $145,000 this year, $42,000 last year. So our total net surplus for the 6 months, especially with the last couple of months and that purchase service I talked about, $777,000 loss this fiscal year over 6 months, $62,000 profit last year over 6 months. So that's the operation side. Cash is still doing well as long as we get to keep what we have got. If you go down to page 25, I'll take you through where we are at the end of December. And this is for the money that's not in the reserve. Our beginning balance actually was $421,000, where I thought we would kind of need to be in a negative position without reserves being transferred as far as my projection. So that was positive. We actually collected in the month of December $3.1 million versus what I said was $2 million. Mostly, as you can see there, from Medi-Cal. That's been going up fairly reasonably, and it all depends on the timing of it. It comes every week, and the timing of that usually is on a Tuesday. The timing, if we get the third week in the month, it actually helps. You can see the direct disbursements, $2.5 million this year, $2.6 million last year. That means we're down a little bit. We're down basically mostly in some professional fees and a little bit in salaries for the most part. We did spend $117,000 in construction, where I said $10,000 for the month. I said $10,000 in the budget. That was where we paid $100,000 in addition to the architect. The IGT money we did get, we do have IGT money out of 1.4 million that we took and put into the IGT that we didn't know we would have in that funding. But basically it's money that is going to be repaid in double back to us. I said we were going to have to take about 250,000 out of LAIF, and we wouldn't be funding at that particular point in time the IG for anything for IGT. But we didn't have to take anything out of LAIF. All that IGT funding came directly from our funds, our operating funds that we had available. That leaves us with before the reserves in our operating funds, 373,000 negative, and that was even with the money we had to pay out for IGT. I said it was going to be 899, even with money of $250,000 coming in from LAIF. We do have 145,000 in our operating reserve, and our Medicare overpayment reserve, I said we'd have 774. It's actually 1,075,000 to leave us a cash balance actually of 846,000 versus what I said would be 19,000 in the budget. And that's our cash position for operations. That's my report, unless there are questions.
Thanks, Chad. Are there any questions, Scott?
Ross, I just had two quick questions. Chad, this is John. On page 24, which is the executive financial summary, I know we usually don't go over. I know we usually don't go over the balance sheet, but as it relates to the, when we do move forward on the bonds, the refinancing of the bonds, will that be listed under the long-term debt portion on the balance sheet? That 8.
There's two portions actually on the balance. There's two portions on the balance sheet, John. Okay. There's what's due in the 12 months that you're actually in. That's the current portion, the current 12 months. That portion is in current liabilities. And then there's a long-term portion, which is the remaining amount that's to be paid in future years. So there's two portions of that. I think you can kind of see it. Let me see if I've got that page in here, put in here. I don't see the balance sheet, but let me see if I've got my liabilities sheet in here.
If you can't find it, Chet, we can go over it another day. That's
okay.
Fine. But
I do have it in front of me. I can tell you.
Okay.
But we didn't go over it at the finance meeting. But let me look at what's in current. Let me just pull my sheets. Okay, on the balance sheet, for the bond, what we have is as of this month, in the current portion of bonds, we have 2,870,000, and in the long-term portion, we have 1,470,000. Okay. So those are the two portions of the bonds that are there. Again, current 2,870,000, long-term 1,470,000.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah, and those are the ones that are insured by Cal Mortgage, right? That we're going to be retiring.
Actually, the Cal Mortgage notes are in the current portion of that.
Okay.
That 2,000,000. It's 2,870,000 includes the Cal Mortgage portion.
Okay, got it. And then my second follow-up question to that, on page 27, which is the bond requirement page. Now, when this, when the refinancing goes through, is this page going to go away? The The bond
actually, it can go away if you want it to, but what will happen, there's no capital replacement requirement. Okay, that's the first part of that.
Okay.
There's no bond reserve. That would be the second portion of that. It would go away. But the current funding towards the payment, I propose that we leave that there. It is on a, with First Foundation, it's on a semi-annual basis, the same way this is.
Okay.
I don't know yet because I don't have the particulars, whether we only have to pay the interest on the first half of the year and then the interest and principal, interest on the second half of the year, and both the full principal up on the second half of the year, probably just like this. So I would say we would want to keep this sheet just the way it is, only with the new amounts, unless the board wants something different.
Okay. All right, thank you, Chet.
The other thing we would do is they're not on this sheet, but they are in the supplementals in our finance meeting that we go over, and it is the ratios, the ratio analysis, meaning that there will be a days cash on hand ratio requirement. That's the only thing, and a debt service coverage requirement. Actually, Gary talked about the debt service coverage. It's 1.25. So that would be there, and we would actually report on that each month as well. And the days cash on hand, we would report on it is not on here on a monthly basis. I report it to the trustee on an annual basis, and I do calculate it on a monthly basis. What we would do is we would put that, I would propose that we would put that in to our ratio sheet where we have some other ratios that are required on the current bonds.
Okay.
If that makes sense to you.
Yes, yeah, it does. Thank you, Chet.
Uh-huh.
Any other questions for Chet? Chet, thank you for your report.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we are on to new business item 2, Rural Health Clinic Physician Services Agreement. Samantha Mongar-Cram. Tim?
Okay. Yes, this is an agreement with Dr. Mongar. She's interested in working in our rural health clinic. Greg and I have been talking with her about the possibility of coming over there. And so we've been negotiating with an agreement with her to do that. And this agreement that we have here in front of you. It is, for the most part, consistent with what we've done with a number of the others. There is, one exception. Obviously, there was a $20,000 retention bonus put on here, which is kind of similar to a sign-on bonus. Primarily, her work for us before was working as one of our hospitalists, and now we're basically asking her to go in and begin developing a practice within the clinic of seeing patients. We are, in fact, have some benefit in here because she had an extensive following of patients that she was caring for in the rural health clinic at Ridgecrest, who apparently are interested in coming over and begin seeing her here if she would make herself available to do that. So again, this is, the terms of this are consistent with what we pay. The rate of pay is the same, that we're paying the other physicians. And so requesting permission to go ahead and execute this agreement with her. If there are any questions.
Any board members have questions?
Make a motion. We'll do that.
Go ahead, Gene.
Can I make a motion that we approved his request?
We can. Is there a second?
I will second that.
I'll second.
Okay, we'll take Catherine's second. And we'll do a vote. Are there any other discussions or questions by board members? Any member of the public wishing to be heard on this item? Okay, seeing none, then Catherine, your vote?
Yes.
Director Parks, your vote?
Yes.
Director Clark, your vote?
Yes.
It's funny, I can see your lips move before I can hear your voice. Director Blythe?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. That contract.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, the next item is board education, the LMS courses. And Tim, if you could just give a brief background on this.
LMS is our learning management system. It is an online system that we use for training all of our staff in the hospital on a broad spectrum of topics. There are a number of topics that are required either by statute or regulation. Our thought was, again, since primarily we're doing just the employees, that this was a great opportunity for the board as well, because the board should know exactly what the employees are being asked to do. And so there were, I believe it was, I can't remember, it was 6 or 7 courses that were selected for the board. When we presented this the other day, the board did in fact ask, roughly what kind of time commitments were these. And so that is what this report shows, each of the course by title, and then the hours that it takes to complete that course. Some of those actually can be done faster, but for the most part, those are pretty accurate numbers. So again, I think, and there's a whole host of other educational topics available in there, literally from clinical care to, employee behavior issues and you name it. I mean, it's a vast library of courses that any of our employees can take. And so, like I said, I think it really gives a great idea to the board, obviously, to see what we've been doing here for the last several years with education for our staff. It is, again, it's a great way for us to do that. We've, again, had some challenges in the past, how it was structured in terms of the number of courses and so forth. We've tried to work with the employees to kind of spread that out a little bit so it didn't hit all at one time. I think they've found that to be much more doable in terms of their time commitments and so forth. And so they get maybe 1 or 2 classes a month that they've got to sit in instead of 11 or 12 all at once. And so, again, I think strongly encourage the board to take advantage of this. And, the question, like I said, I think really would be great to have the board try to get the board to make sure at least they get these courses all completed.
So this came as a result of the compliance committee, and Brenda Pettyjohn had brought this forward. I was really excited about the idea. I think it will give us, all the board members, a level playing field in terms of our background information on what the requirements are for staff and hospitals, and for our own information, so we know what the requirements are as well in detail. And one of the roles of the governance committee, which is a separate committee, is to basically outline kind of an education program for board members. And it looks like Brenda Pettyjohn has taken a big step forward in providing a lot of basic hospital operation knowledge with this list of classes. So I'd asked that it be placed on the board agenda for all the board members to look at. I mean, I was excited about it. Fred was excited about it, but we're just 2 on the committee and wanted to get the other board members' feedback before we move forward and kind of making this a norm for board members. So what are your thoughts, guys?
But I see a little bit of a problem, Russ. What if you have a board member that knows everything?
Well, there's that.
That is a big problem.
That would be me.
That sounds awesome. That sounds really great. Very, very good. Even for those of us who know everything.
Scott, is there any way that the corporate compliance ethics and the harassment in the workplace. They're both 1 hour segment classes. Can that fulfill our 2 hour ethics training requirement, perhaps?
Unfortunately, it can't, because
No.
AB 1234, which is the ethics law, mandates the 19 categories of law that have to be discussed in the training. Okay. It also has to be given by a qualified trainer.
Okay. All right. Well, that was a nice try.
How often do we have to do that, Scott?
Every 2 years.
Every 2 years?
Yeah, so you just started a new 2-year period. So January 2021 to December 2022, you have to do 2 hours of the ethics training.
Okay.
And actually, Catherine and Fred need to do it within their first year of office because they are new directors.
So we should do it all together, though. Like me, that would finish me off for the next 2 years, right?
Yeah, I think that in general, excuse me, it's probably helpful for other than new board members to do 1 hour each year, because it just kind of provides a reminder of the myriad of ethics and conflict laws that you have to follow. Now, of course, if you're doing the online training, then you just do it in one fell swoop and you just do the 2 hours and you're done. But if you did do the in-person training, then my experience has been 1 hour a year is very helpful, just because there are a lot of things that you have to remember.
And you would miss all of Scott's great examples that he gives on these.
Very fun stories of directors doing crazy things.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, I still think Brenda Pettyjohn's list of classes is still good, even if we have to do a double dose of ethics training. So
yeah, I want to know if I can do some of those classes.
That's a possibility. We just have to look and see how many licenses we've got. I know that's an issue, because we have X number of people that we can have training at a given time.
I know. They just look like good classes.
They are. They're very good classes.
Well, Gene's going to teach them for us.
That's true. Yeah, we could do that.
So if there are no objections to the board members taking advantage of this online training, we would essentially, we would be given a login and a password to tap into the training system, and then we would start tackling these courses on our own time, over the next year or two. I don't know what kind of time limit you want to put on yourselves, but maybe one a month, and we can all bang them out in 6 months.
We can't make a motion now, or do we even need one?
I don't know that we need one. I really wanted it on the board's agenda so we can have a discussion about it, on how you want it. Do you want to make it a mandate? Is it just voluntary? Suggestion? How do you want to approach this?
Well, it is listed as an action item, though.
It is, so we can vote on it.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I think it's a good idea. I mean, the general consensus of the board seems like it's a pretty good idea to do these kinds of things. So,
okay, is it mandatory, like you're saying, or is it an option?
That's what we're discussing. Do you want to make it mandatory, or do you want to leave it open?
Well,
we ask a question, Ross. If you make it mandatory and a director doesn't do the training, what is your recourse?
Fire him.
Yeah, let me just say that you really don't have recourse, since it's not a requirement for being an elected official. I totally appreciate the idea and think it's a great idea, and encourage all directors to do it. Get as much training as you can. I'm just not sure that if you make it mandatory that there's anything that you can do if a director refuses to take the classes.
Okay, that's a good point.
Well, the ethics though is mandatory, right? The AB1 1234.
Yeah, AB 1234 is mandatory.
Can I make a
So
motion?
would you want the board to come like there to the classroom to do the training, or will it be put on our phone or computer to do it, log in there?
It'd be
You can do it from home.
And is these the only ones that you think are at this point that it becomes a high important?
You know, during the committee discussion, these were the ones that Brenda identified as probably being the most helpful from a board member perspective. But she said there are dozens of training classes on there that I wouldn't think there'd be any reason why you wouldn't be able to do the others if you had access to these as well, if you're so inclined.
Well, I do them now where I work. So, I mean, that's not a problem, you know, doing them again. I just didn't know if there was a certain reason that these stand out above others. So, and as far as making them mandatory, I don't think, I mean, how are you going to mandate that we show up or do them, you know? But I think,
Catherine,
if we're here, if we're here to serve the community, then we should do these just because to help us and others know that we're doing our part.
So the LMS you can do from home. The AB 12 Scott was talking about, I'm not sure how that is offered. I don't know if it has to be a live session or if it's going to be online.
I think they have one in Vegas next month.
I'm teaching it.
Got a quarantine afterwards, though.
But it's HIPAA, it's mandatory abuse training, it's all those kinds of things, and you're well aware of those.
Yeah, and I think they're important to do. The HIPAA, huge for us that are on the board that are speaking here in a public forum. Sometimes I think we forget that when we're joking around or wanting to know how so-and-so's mother's doing or something. So I just think that that's good. And the harassment in the workplace. I mean, all these I think are good ones. And I've done them for years. So I know the importance of them. So I'm glad that these were brought forward. However, the board, you know, talked about adding them for us to do them. But I think that this will be good because I think it's something that, well, even like in infection control, our numbers weren't up during COVID when in a hospital, they should not have any room. They should stay up because that's what we are. We're for healthcare and keeping, you know, people safe. But yet during infection control, as far as COVID goes, our numbers got better. So there's always room for improvement, I think.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
So if we identify these 6 items that Brenda has recommended that be basic board knowledge, then maybe our action tonight is to adopt these as our goal for a knowledge basis for the next 2 years, and cap it at that. Is that a good way to say it?
Yeah. Make a motion just the way you said it.
Okay.
If we need a motion.
Do you want to make that a motion, Gene?
Yes.
Okay, so moved. Do we have a second?
I'll second that, Ross.
Thanks, Fred. Okay, then a vote. Director Elkonin?
Yes.
Director Parks?
Yes.
Director Clark?
Yes.
Director Blythe?
Yes.
And Elliot is a yes. So thank you. Good discussion. Appreciate your input. So item J, director's comments on items not appearing on the agenda. And we'll start with Director Blythe.
Just to reiterate what I've said in the last few meetings, just kudos to the staff and the administration with the COVID testing and the vaccine distribution and all the stress that I know everybody has been under. I think everybody's doing a really fantastic job. And also my condolences to Tim and his mother-in-law and hope he has a safe travels.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you, John. Director Clark.
Everything I have to say just mimics what John Blight just stated. So just thank you to everybody. And Tim, I'm sorry for everything you're dealing with, and just be safe getting to El Paso.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. We will do that.
Director Parks.
Basically the same thing. Everybody's in the hospital right now, real troopers. They're performing absolutely awesome. And again, I hope we can find some way to give them some compensation. I know they're not working for it, but they more than deserve it. Even Tim.
I'm good, thank you. I appreciate the thought, though.
Okay.
Choking over here on my water.
Director Alconen.
I actually just have one comment, and I want to talk about the nurses that were out doing the COVID testing and stuff. I know Mark made the comment about, can't wait to get them in and do real nurse training in there. But, being out there and doing the customer service and the stuff that they were doing, I think will be productive for them in the long run, just when you're out there dealing with the community. So I'm glad that they were out there doing what needed to be done in this time, but also glad that they'll be going in to get the training and being able to do what they were trained for.
Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. So, we had discussed, we were told at the building and planning meeting where we meet as a board about the 3 stars rating for the SNF, but we didn't discuss it tonight. So I wanted to just say this is so fantastic. This is a 3-star rating for our skilled nursing facility. It just hits it out of the park, folks. Just hits it out of the park. I know that was a. What's that?
We were only 25. We were actually only 25 points off of 4 stars, by the way.
Amazing. Oh, that's amazing. I know there's a huge effort to get to that point. We know internally through our observations what a great facility that is. But now we've met all the marks, and from an independent evaluator's perspective, we're getting that validation. And hopefully that'll start bringing patients in, and our census will grow because of it. And just wanted to thank everybody for their extraordinary efforts to make that happen. I think it's really important, and I'm so glad to see it.
They're shooting for 5. They're shooting for 5 stars, so that's their goal. So, which we are doing everything we can to support them in that.
All right. I want to echo the comments on the effort to vaccinate the community with the mobile van. Fantastic effort. The community is so appreciative of the work that's being done for this outreach, to have it available to the community. It really is a huge stress reliever for people that can qualify to get the shots at this point. And to make that effort to do the community outreach and make that happen is just a joy. It's the right thing to do. And I'm really, really excited about it. I think the only thing what's that?
Ross, I was just going to say, I know Greg is in the room, and I really, again, would like to mirror what you're saying and just really reach out. He has put his whole heart into this thing. He is the program in many respects, and really deserves recognition for that. I really wanted to thank him in front of the board for that. So if he wants to add a comment after, that would be great. But again, it's a big, big job. So I thank him.
Huge job. Greg, are you in the room? Are you out of the view of the camera?
I'm out of the view of the camera, but thank you. It's been, yeah, we're scheduled to do 130 shots tomorrow. So it's, yeah, it's a big project, but it's important for the community. And I understand the community really appreciates it, and they tell us that. So thank you.
I'm glad you're getting to hear it firsthand. It's amazing. It's amazing what you've had you've taken on and actually brought it to reality. So excellent job, Greg. Just excellent job. I'm still available though to volunteer to return phone calls. I know that we have that recording line where you call in, leave your contact information, and then we'll call you back with an appointment. And you know, the list has gotten so long, much longer than the vaccine that we have available. I think the community is kind of expecting a call back sooner, even if you can't make an appointment. Just an acknowledgement, hey, we've got your information, you're on the waiting list. I don't know if we can make that happen, but if you need an extra set of hands to return calls, I'd be glad to do it. As a board member, I'd be glad to do it. I'll bet some of the other board members might be willing to do it. So
yes,
whatever we need to do to make that happen, to help you out, not just sit here from the dais and throw our opinions around, but actually put our boots on the ground and do some dialing. Be glad to help, Greg.
All right. Thank you. I might have some other tasks for you to do, so I'll reach out to you.
Okay.
Yeah, be careful when you volunteer, Ross. That's right. They will take you up on it.
Hey, and I also wanted to mention the electronic health record system for the rehab facility, for our rehab center. The proposal that Grace brought forth last week to committee and then was approved on our consent agenda tonight allows for not only an enhanced patient record system, but the other component is the distance telemedicine type visit with physical therapy. So the physical therapist can actually do their treatment over the telephone with video equipment showing how to do the stretches and the bends and all that they need to do to get their patients well. So innovative and so needed, and just wanted to thank Grace and Jeff and the gang at the rehab center for bringing that proposal forward. I think it's really going to be a good move. It's consistent with our strategic plan, and it really moves the district forward. So thanks for that. So with that,
I'll let her know.
Thank you. Tim, my condolences to your family as well. I know you've got some hard days ahead of you, and be safe, my friend.
I will do that. Thank you very much. I appreciate everybody's support, and we'll be back as quick as we can.
All right. Anything before we adjourn?
Just thanks to the staff for holding down the fort for me. So.
All right. All right. We stand adjourned. Thank you all.
Good night, everyone. Good evening. Good night, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Do we have to leave the meeting?
Yes.